Very good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to season one's episode 9 of the Global Hint for a discussion on decluttering the imperatives to extend beyond the Indo-Pacific with retired Lieutenant Colonel Prashant.
Okay, hi.
Um, I think we've lost Vamya, have we?
Yeah, I think.
Um, Vamya, can you hear us? All right, sir. So then I will. Vamya? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Sure, sir. So I'll continue and then Vamya can jump in when she can join us back. So welcome everybody to season 1, episode 9 of the Global Hint for a discussion on decluttering the imperatives to extend Quad in the Indo-Pacific with retired Colonel Prashant Mishra and my co-moderator Vamya. So, Quad, which is the quadrilateral security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, signifies a unified resolve among four nations to counter Chinese growing assertiveness in the Indo Pacific. China perceives Quad as an Asian NATO, and Australia has withdrawn itself from the security dialogue due to the economic involvement and so as to not provoke China. But in November 2017, the organization was resurrected after a 10-year hiatus. While India has taken a position that it does not aim to sideline China in the Indo Pacific region, the relationship between both the countries has been degenerating rapidly at the line of actual control. This may change India's position with respect to Quad and China. Quad enlargement to Quad Plus is also possible with prospects of the UK, France, Germany, with other countries like Vietnam, Philippines, South Korea, and New Zealand joining. Many doubts regarding the structure and effectiveness of Quad have been raised, and presently there are more questions than answers regarding it. Let's hope this session can change that. But before we start, a few housekeeping points. The live stream is open for questions to members of the public. Please feel free to put in your questions at all the live streaming handles, and we will try and accommodate as many questions as we can. So before we begin, sir, would you like to have some preliminary remarks?
Okay, so this discussion is very imperative from the point of view of what is happening currently in our Eastern Asian region, and it's important that we understand the basics and we go into the depth of the why behind the entire impact of whatever has happened in the Eastern region, as well as the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. A good dialogue that we have today, and let's hope that at the end of it, we come out with a clarity of understanding.
Right, sir. So, Vamya, would you like to take the first question?
Uh, sure. Sir, is Quad capable enough of creating a potent security framework in the Indo-Pacific region? And if so, what would such a structure look like?
So, as you already stated, that a Quad was something like it has come up like an anti-China group, and China feels so, and so does the rest of the world. Now, does Quad fit in into a posturing that comes out as a military posturing, and can it provide security for what, uh, as four nations we are, whatever our concerns are? Is that the answer would be actually somewhere between no and maybe, because Quad as such is still informal. It is not yet formalized. And when we say Asian, not NATO, NATO had a very formal structure. And there was a way in which you could enter NATO. Like when Turkey became the member of NATO, despite being uh, let's say, not a typical NATO nation, if you define,
Mhm.
it took it a lot of efforts to get into NATO, and it had to comply to a lot of norms. So when you become a NATO kind of a structure, then there is obviously something that comes up which forms the template. And now there is no such template here, and it still remains as a informal kind of arrangement where whenever there is international meeting, like ASEAN, SCO, or anything of that sort, then on the sidelines, the foreign ministers of the four countries, they meet and they exchange their views about the security imperatives and all that. Now, so to shorten the answer, I would say I would personally say no, but from a diplomatic point of view, I can say a kind of a maybe. Yes, if there are few things which are implemented, then it can guarantee security uh, in the form that we want.
Right, sir. So taking you on from there, just a quick question. So what is the importance of the Quad to the ASEAN and other interested parties in the ocean Indian Ocean region and the Pacific? Is it a competitive organization? Is something that can promote cooperation?
So, okay, so I'll go slightly into the, I'll go slightly 25 years back, and I'll take you to about 1990s, when
Hmm.
we entered the era of globalization. Everybody was speaking about globalization, and there was, the opening up of the barriers. All these international institutions came up, like the WHO and WHO and WTO and all those. And China started getting into manufacturing, and the rest of the world, especially Europe and USA, they started promoting China as the manufacturing hub of the world. And that is the time when you can say that there was kind of a thought process that came in that period of 25 years, that okay, we will consider China and as a assured global manufacturer, and hence all the supply chain, all the manufacturing moved from the West into China, and China started getting the raw material from wherever it wanted to. For example, Australia, or other nations, producing the goods in its very cheap labor market and giving out to the rest of the world. Now, when the climb of China happened, it started growing at a pace which was kind of not very comforting to US. And US being the after the fall of the Soviet Union, uh, it was a unilateral kind of a world, where there was just one global power, and the global power was the United States. And when China wants to challenge it, so it starts creating institutions, it starts creating currencies and modes of exchange where the dollar is challenged, the US formed institutions of the United Nations is challenged. So everything became challenged. WTO became challenged. The rest of the international institutions, all the international banks, they became challenged, and the regional groups came up. SCO was one of them. They wanted to form a Chinese bank, and the Chinese headed bank, where the Asian regions, Asian countries. So in ASEAN also, Chinese came up in big way. So this is the way how the global institutions started getting corrupted and broken up. And that is how you see the emergence of these local institutions, these localized regional, or some people call it multilateralism, though multilateralism is something that is not very well understood. Uh, and Quad, as such, formed in that flow. Quad was formed because of the failure of the global institutions to, uh, you know, uh, implement certain things, certain trade norms. There used to be trade wars, and the WTO was not able to solve it. So where do you go? So then you start getting into bilateral, trilateral, or multilateral agreements. And this was Quad was one such kind of an unofficial thing. Others which were more structured were SCO and the ASEAN. So in terms of competition, um, Quad as such doesn't have an Asian competition, because all the Asian institutions that have been formed, whether it is a multilateral institution or a bilateral institution, it's mostly anti-West. If you look at any institution that is formed by heading where Chinese are heading it, they are having the Western. When I say West, it is Europe and the US, and that part of the world, the Americas, and these institutions like BRIC was formed. Though it did not, BRIC was also a kind of a. It did not have too much of a structure, but it did come up. So many multilateral organizations came up, and yet they were not able to address the issues. So if you look at, is this a solution? I would say no, this is not the solution. Can these quasi official institutions actually give any kind of a benefit to the world? I don't think that has been proven. They are failing because until you have these, like NATO has succeeded. NATO has to a very large extent been, wherever the United Nations has failed, NATO has succeeded. And NATO has succeeded in many terms, in terms of the aims of the states which are part of the NATO, and they wanted certain things to be implemented. They implemented in their own ways. Like Syria is one of the examples. So when you say the regional organizations which have been formed here, are they succeeding? No, they are not. Why they're not succeeding? Probably the United States never wanted them to succeed, and still United States is a global power. It will remain so for many years to come. And till the time in any such group, United States is there, you can't have a success of any institution which is formed like that. I hope I have answered it.
Yes, actually, you raise some excellent points that take me to the next question. So, if I understand this correctly, so it's not just the defense aspects that need to be considered. And Quad being an informal organization, it's not really been solidified into what territories they would be going into. And again, like you mentioned, misunderstood sense of multilateralism. So, where does the role of China's debt trap diplomacy factor in all of this?
So what has happened is that uh, the COVID actually changed the entire world structure. Now, if you look at whenever there is a great power game, you look at when the United States took over from the United Kingdom as the great power, and thereafter the Cold War commenced, and the fall of the Soviet Union happened. So when you look at the great power game, how does a power become great? Power becomes great by trying to first clean its backyard. So it creates a area, and that is how United States became a great power. First, it cleaned up its south and north. So it took control of Canada, it took control of Mexico, and it cleaned it up. It had no opposition from these two countries. It doesn't have. So its backyard is absolutely clean. The entire Atlantic and Pacific boats are also clean as far as thousands of kilometers east and west of United States is concerned. So becoming a great power requires you first to clean up the backyard, and that is what China was trying. So after it rose constantly year over year at 10%, 9 to 10% of growth rate. So it went into its head, and it started thinking that it can become a great power, but it's nowhere near it. It probably jumped the gun. And much before the COVID started, it started showing its muscles. Actually, people say that China started flexing its muscles post COVID. It did not happen so. It had started showing its muscles much before. Somewhere in 2007, 8, when the global crisis happened, China actually it went into their head that because the economies crashed, the entire Western economies crashed, and Chinese economy did not. So it went into their head. They thought that probably this is the end of the Western civilization as heading the the global order, and now we will start our growth. And it was unprecedented growth that you saw post 2008. It was they were touching 10% always, and that is the time when we started seeing that they will start heating up. Their economy will start heating up. If economy started heating up means you can't maintain that growth rate. That sustainability is not. So when China started rising and it started flexing its muscles and it started getting into the great power game, so it wanted to clean up its backyard. And how do you clean up your backyard? You have to first get all the countries with whom you have got border disputes. Those 14 countries they have got border disputes with. They have to resolve it. You have to have a blue water navy, which means you can project power anywhere within thousands of kilometers of your coastline. And if when that happens, then the Chinese mentality, if you look at China, China has a mentality of the Middle Kingdom mentality. That's what the Chinese are genetically. The Middle Kingdom is that I'm the state, I'm the supreme state, and the rest of the world is a tributary, and they should pay me license fee or wages or whatever you call it for allowing them to have their independence and freedom and their rights and giving them business. And that is what they did to Australia. When they were getting this business from Australia, it hardly mattered to China when they stopped it. So in any sector, whether it is the coal sector or the the food sector, nowhere the Australian input into the Chinese economy was more than 3 to 10%. Everywhere it was within 10% of this. So when they stopped the Australian input, it did not matter much to them. But it matters a lot to Australia because for Australia, somewhere these sectors were somewhere like 60% or something. So Chinese aims, I would say, were something that were very, very. Just a moment, I'll just. Um, Chinese aim. Sorry, I'll just a moment. Yeah. So the Chinese aims are very, I'll say, hegemonic, and they were very oriented towards getting a military supremacy. And that is what is troubling here, because when you see Quad, the Quad was formed way back in 2007. In fact, 2007 was the official announcement by the Prime Minister of Japan. But since 2004, the tsunami that happened in 2004, Quad was in some kind of a existence. So Quad's entire history from 2007 to then revival in 2017 after the Doklam uh, rested on two nations. Japan could not make it work, though Japan is inherently, it knows that it has that feeling of insecurity when China rises.
I think we've lost connection with Sir.
We will be just resuming with the session in a minute or so. The broadcast will continue, but anyways, whatever the discussion which has been going on, I think uh, we actually started with a good trajectory. So let's see. But yeah, let's just wait for a minute.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so until Sir is joining, there's one interesting thing that fine. This we can't say it's a multilateral body, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, um, again, formalizing any alliance takes time because it's not just about strategic interests. It's always about how countries perceive a legal framework or a political alignment which is there. So, I mean, how do you see what political alignment are we seeing here? Because often what is happening is that we compare Quad with NATO, although it's a very overrated comparison. But still, do we see any political or international legal alignment here? Anything? Yeah.
Sure, Abhivadan. Actually, that's an excellent point because I think from what happens is most tend to perceive Quad from a military perspective, right? So, and that the biggest challenger to that would be China. In that sense, everyone would want to compare it with NATO, but like Sir had already mentioned earlier in his comments, it's nowhere an alignment as close to what NATO is. And having said that, there have been a lot of differences between the Quad members, which also led to Australia dropping out in the beginning. And once Australia dropped out, India was very skeptical of coming back because there was this perception in New Delhi that Japan, Australia, and United States, anyways, had a sort of alliance. And if they were to anger China, India, with the longest amount of territory that they share with China, had the maximum to lose. And to add to that, there all these economic imperatives, and India is not as developed as compared to China, the United States, and Japan. And another point that was very beautifully brought out in this book by our current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar, it's called The India Way. I highly recommend it to all our audience members. Is that there has been this cultural dissonance when it comes to Japan, and there has been a lot of effort to kind of find this common footing culturally between Japan and India to make an alliance on the basis of culture. So these are these little things that must be kept in mind before even a legal framework can be thought of.
Yep. I think one interesting thing from the India Way by Dr. Jaishankar's book is something which we can very interestingly infer is that before being the Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar has been really connected with people around the world. And if we see his past positions, very interestingly, he was in China during the 16th Chinese Communist Party's Congress. He was in the United States during the Obama administration and the Bush administration, if I'm right. And one thing which is very interesting, and I think if we take the Indian perspective, it's a very bipartisan reality that we see is that when it comes to Indo-US ties, uh, whatever the coalitions have been at power, the governments have had a very clear approach in India and the USA as to how they should develop their relations. I think one aspect was there which uh, could actually enable the idea of Quad, because again, yes, in 2007 it was not formalized. Uh, there were disagreements. One of the reasons also was that Kevin Root, the former Prime Minister of Australia, was also the person who actually opted out. But then in 2017, more or less, if we see the main achievement goes to basically two leaders, Shinzo Abe and Donald Trump, because again, yes, Quad meetings used to happen, but again, the meetings which used to happen were not up to that level. They were to a very limited level, like at the level of secretary and so forth. So um, that's one interesting thing. But I think we need to see. I mean, that's also related to the US-Indo relations, but that's certainly true that establishing some legal aspect is very important because whether or not international law always represents at a regional level into what kind of soft power approaches countries can apply. That's exactly why EU was formed and EU has been successful. And I mean, that's the reason why GCC was formed in the Middle East. So maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Okay, I like.
yeah, sorry, Salika, please. I think
No, I like. Sir has joined. Perfect.
Sorry.
So can you hear us?
Excuse me.
Sorry. So yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry. So where did I lose you?
So you were talking about China and its
Where was
perception
I?
as the Middle Kingdom.
So, did I speak? Did you get the part where I spoke about the cleaning the backyard?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Got it.
Okay. So that is the part. I don't know. I think my mobile is acting funny. So if I go out of transmission, then probably you'll have to see how to manage it. Um, Now, the part of cleaning the backyard was clear. So any superpower, when it rises, and when a existing superpower it declines, there is a chaotic world order that happens. And this happened during the Second World War. This happened during the First World War. And the period between First World War and Second World War was the time when United Kingdoms actually handed over the superpower status to United States. But in case of those two countries, it was more of a friendly kind of arrangement, and it happened in a very there was some chaos, but the world order did not have to break down and be reconstructed from the base, because both of them were Western civilizations, and their foundations were based on a Western concept. Um, but in case of China, it's an Asian power, and it's an Asian culture, and it's too different from the Western system. So the handing over of the great power, um, whatever you call it, crown from United States to China, it is not going to be that easy. Firstly, even if China does reach a military status where it is able to dominate most of its backyard. So what China is aiming for is 2049, when it completes 100 years. It would have washed off its 100 years of humiliation, what it calls as 100 years of humiliation. And it will become a world power where its navy will have about 500 ships. Now, at that point of time, the quad combined will not be able to field a 500 ship navy in the Pacific Indian Ocean region. That's the reality of the facts. Now, when you look at the Chinese rise, it's surrounded by mountains from all three sides, other than the one side where there is Gobi Desert, and that enters into the Kazakhstan and that area, the what do you call that? Those Soviet republics which broke off, the Muslim area, which Turkish Muslim area, which goes into the Europe, and the rest of the, whether it is with Russia or with India, most of the places it is a mountainous border, and then on the eastern edge you have the ocean, and that is where that is all they have to secure actually. If you look at Chinese, because none of these countries which are bordering are so far, none of them are imperialistic, or they don't want to expand, or they don't want to get more territory. They are not into that kind of a business. So the only area where it has to bother about is the Indian Ocean and the Pacific region. And if it has a 500 ship or a vessel, sorry, ship is not the right word, a 500 vessel navy, it's a power to reckon with. And if it is able to dominate this entire region of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean region, then you have got a lot of insecurities for these countries which are there. because the Chinese way of ruling is different from what the Western way of ruling was, as far as the superpower game is concerned. And the Western people had a template. They had a rule of the law. I mean, the very reason that China could not enter the World Trade Organization or the International Court of Justice was because it did not want anybody to get into its internal dynamics of the way they are treating their own people. They said that that's my business, and even if I do whatever I'm doing in Xinjiang, you guys are not supposed to actually ask me any questions. So if that kind of a country is there, then you have got concerns as to what kind of a world order it will look like. Even if China doesn't become a world power, I mean, it's too far away. Let's say 2049, you just imagine if China is able to keep its economy rising at even 3 to 5%, and it will surpass the United States in terms of per capita GDP, and it will also surpass the rest of the Europe and rest of the world in terms of military and other parts. So the moment it reaches that kind of a thing, and that rise is it's something like moment of inertia. Like if for past 25 years you have been rising at a certain pace, you can't suddenly put a full stop to it. Economies don't come to a full stop. They come to a grinding halt. I mean, they may go to a slowdown and then slowly die down, but they don't come to a full stop. There is no full stop here. It's like a huge ship, aircraft carrier sailing in the ocean. It will take 20-25 kilometers to come to a halt. Hello. Sorry. I think we lost internet
Yes.
for a while.
Yes, sir. We lost you for a
So
bit.
I'm finished. I'm finished. You can go to the next question.
Sure. Bamya, would you like to take the next question? Bamya, I think you're muted.
Hello. Yeah. So after
Yeah.
Quad got resurrected in 2017, India tried to decouple Quad and its strategy for the Indo-Pacific region. Could it benefit
Mhm.
India to align its Indo-Pacific strategy with that of Quad?
Okay. So Indian belief has been, and the Indian the basic thought process has been that it is something like France. So so I'll just talk a little bit on France. So France, if you see, doesn't have any kind of alliances which are binding. So it when it wants to sell the nuclear technology to India, it sells it. Nobody can stop it. If it wants to sell a rocket technology, or it wants to launch a satellite of a nation, it does it. Because post Second World War, what France actually did was that they said that we have to become self-sufficient, and we know that in the arena of global power, there are no permanent enemies and permanent friends. So our position is something similar to France. In the 1971 war, when the United States sent the Seventh Fleet into the Indian Ocean region with nuclear weapons, I mean, that was a eye opener for the Indians. It gave us a thrashing slap on our face. We never thought that the world's largest democracy and the world's most successful democracy will come to forefront, where we were trying to help out a humanitarian crisis which was on our borders. And if you look at the Bangladesh war, it was never for expansionist reasons. It was like we were trying to address a issue where the Pakistanis had miserably failed. And when the Seventh Fleet came into the Indian Ocean region, and it started getting into the Bay of Bengal, that is the time when the strategic community of India actually woke up. And they said that, look, I don't think there are any alliances in the world, because even at that point of time, during the 62 war, there are some guarantees that we thought were available with us, even issue, because we were helping the CIA in Tibet from USA. It did not happen. When they attacked us, they came in almost 80 kilometers, and the US did not. In case of, if you look at how ironical it is, that another Asian nation like Korea, where it was attacked in 1950 by the Chinese supported North Koreans. The Americans sent in aircrafts and all kind of and hundreds of ships into that region to support the Korean this thing. And here Nehru was requesting Kennedy for a certain number of squadrons and all that, and he was saying no. He sent a committee to look into it. So India woke up in the from 1962 to 1971 and beyond. Our strategic community woke up, and there was a huge lot of tussle, and the entire thought process that went into whether we should nuclearize or not actually gave us a kind of a thinking bend, that how India should look at the world order and how we have to position ourselves when we are threatened. In that scenario, if you look at us, our thought process and our strategic community, which has grown over a period of time, looks at India as a country which doesn't align itself with anyone. As far as possible, India should be able to look after itself without any support. So when you look at aligning itself to Quad and fully supporting it, it is not in the genetics of India. It doesn't come into us, very easily. There is a history that we have and a legacy that we carry, a burden on our shoulders that we just can't wish away. And those are the realities of global existence that are there. India as a nation has got a lot of potentials, and there are people who will not want us to rise. And whether it is a change of government in the United States, that from a very friendly Republican administration, you start getting a very unfriendly Democratic administration. The Clinton era was full of, despite whatever happened, the parliament attacks and all that. I mean, Clinton did not let us go into Pakistan. I mean, it was more of, I would not say that they stopped us, but they threatened us that Pakistanis will launch a nuclear attack on you. So what are you doing as a democratic country? You allowed Pakistan to become a nuclear nation. You gave it all F-16s. What were you doing that point of time? You did not know about it? Very silly to know that the superpower did not know about a country becoming nuclear. So Indian thought processes become kind of balanced off over a period of time. And we do not think that Quad is the only way out of the situation. And we do not also think that countering China is possible through Quad. What we think is that, okay, when I say we, it is my personal thinking and probably a few friends of mine who think in that fashion. What I would say that my personal thinking is that our war with China is on the Himalayan front. And when we fight that war, we'll have to fight it alone. There's no support coming from outside. Nobody's going to send in troops. All these hoopla about the Americans sending in troops and Diego Gracia getting troops from the US troops from Germany getting relocated to other bases around. I mean, all those things are just so sorry, the is breaking up in between. So that is all strategic reposturing. As far as India is concerned, we are just preparing ourselves in our own way. Like our ex-chief General Padmanabhan used to say, and I like it very much, we will change the way we change. So if we have to change our strategic reposturing, we will change in our own way. Nobody's going to, teach us. And when I say teach us, if you look at Quad, I mean, suddenly the Japanese became friendly with us. Suddenly the US became friendly with us. But look at what was there before 2007 and what was there before 2017. we had a very unfriendly Japan. After post Pokhran, Japan had almost broken up everything with us, and you had a United States which was, till the time the 2011, I mean the 9/11 did not take place. The Pakistanis were there for the most favored nation. I mean, they were the front line against terrorism. The country which creates terrorism was their frontline state, and for that they were actually pushing India back. That you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. I mean, you look at how Quad has come into existence. So just like that, that one sentence which is very important to. There are no permanent enemies and friends. There are only permanent interests. So that's very important to understand over here. And as far as Indian viewpoint is concerned, or Indian strategic posturing is concerned, I would say that India will more over have its own internal strengths built up to counter China. Quad may be just an understanding of nations, which may go into forming a kind of, if there is that wording, that is, there's gross miscarriage of justice. So if, let's say, China invades Taiwan, a situation like that, or China takes over a Philippines island, or China invades one of the South Korean small islands and all that. At that point of time, if a crisis situation arises, then probably we may enable posturing ourselves along with the coordinations, but not as a templated kind of a assurance like what the United States used to give post the Cold War. During the Cold War, what the United States used to give was guarantees that if you are attacked, I'm going to commit military. That kind of a thing is not going to come.
Right, sir. Couple of very interesting points there, and I would like to take that forward with you. So the first is in the, like you said, the genetic makeup of India of not aligning, and then the second point of changing the way we change. So India has sort of changed the way it approaches its neighborhood from the look east to act east and neighborhood first policy, and it is also posturing itself as the leader in this region for a global rules-based order, because we've clearly seen that China refuses to listen to any international tribunals. For example, the South China Sea arbitration. So how do you think the Quad would figure in this whole policy that India is now looking to push forward?
Yeah, so that's a very important word that you mentioned, the phrase that global world order. So now, when you're looking at, if you look at, yeah, sorry, we lost. So when you look at the First World War and the formation of the League of Nations, and then when you look at the Second World War, then formation of the United Nations, and somehow these institutions had their own lifetimes because they were formed in a certain scenario, and they started degrading after that. Those scenarios were no longer there. So United Nations started losing the sheen post the Cold World War and the formation of the unipolar world. It became kind of a United States ruled. That is why, um, when you look at the change in the strategic perspectives of countries, then you have to take this into factor that what is the current take. Will you have the globalization or the world order continue as defined by post World War II, or will there be a major change in that definition itself? And who will define that? Will China and the Asian nations who are coming to power, will they define it? Like, for example, if you look at how difficult it has become to just enter a Security Council, despite having the third largest military force, despite being the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operations worldwide, India is not being allowed into the UNSC. Now, this is foolish. I mean, just one country, China, not allowing entry of India, and the rest of the world supporting us. So probably that entire institution has become insignificant, or it has degraded to a limit that probably that template is not fit over here. Now, what will happen? What I foresee is that probably there will be an alternate institution, because what happens is, why did we have to form the United Nations in the first place? That history itself we have to go into. That why did League of Nations with small patches and small editing could not actually continue? It is because the basic foundation itself has to change. That basic foundation changing requires a lot of chaos. An organization which is templated and structured cannot take chaos, because if you shake its foundations, then the entire organization crumbles, and it is very painful. So, United Nations cannot take a change. It's been tried out with World Trade Organization. A lot of organizations have tried out. And done as to how, sorry, so how to change the World Trade Organization. That in fact has actually come out in the open, that it's not easy to change a global organization in a very fast mode. And if you want to change it to suit the current conditions, multilateral, trilateral, and to get in the current global scenario, then you have to shake the foundations. And most of the sessions which have come actually will shake the foundations of the World Trade Organizations. Most of the trade disputes are not getting resolved. For example, the Australian trade dispute, for example, if you look at the current state of Australian ships which are standing there, the Chinese are not letting them go back. The Chinese are not letting even the crew go back. And they're not getting the raw material onto the mainland. What kind of a foolishness is that? I mean, those guys who are on the ship are probably in a very bad state of mind. They may start suicides, and there might be other things that will start off. So if a global institution which was formed to address these issues is not able to address it, then it has lost its sheen. Something else has to come in its place. And it has to be global, because it cannot be local, multilateral, bilateral, or trilateral. You can't have, local dadas. That is hooliganism, more towards hooliganism. If there is a global world order, it has to be a global world. So what my personal view is that probably we will see something of that sort, where a new global institution or foundations of new global institutions are set up, which are agreeable to all. But at the same time, will it happen quick? No, it is not going to happen quick, because when this power struggle is taking place between the existing great power and the to be great power. Let's assume that China is going to be the next great power. When that struggle is happening, at that point of time, it's very difficult to form a global institution, because at that point of time, these two guys are not going to agree to any one single stand. And if you form any global institution taking both into account, that will be so weak that it will not hold. So, from my point of view, the global order has to change. But when will it change? That is a question that is still open.
Right, sir. So now each member of the Quad, they have to align their combined vision for the Quad itself with their individual vision for the Indo-Pacific as well. So do you think it could create any kind of difficulty between the nations trying to align their visions for the Quad as well as their individual interests in the Indo-Pacific region?
No, I don't think, because you see the structure of Quad, and somehow all the four nations have agreed to let it be informal. The structure of Quad is so democratic. The principles of democracy are so embedded into the Quad structure that you will never find the Quad nations at against each other. You will always find Quad nations cooperating in areas where they can cooperate, and doing the value add. They will never be at spearheads with each other, that this has to be done and you have to do it, you have to support. No, that will not happen. So it's a very, very good structure if you look at Quad as a experiment is concerned. And the very scenario where the Quad is looking at Quad Plus to include other countries is also a very good, I would say, a very good, very hopeful step that is happening.
Right, sir. So I find it very interesting that you mentioned there's a need for developing a new global order, and we don't know when that's coming, but that needs to happen. So, what does that entail for what we could say the previous power holders, these former Soviet Union and then following China and the whole axis shifting? So, what is the consequence for those powers?
Okay, so my take on this is very personal. So I did a lot of research on this. So China was my favorite topic right from the start. I mean, my dad participated in 1962 war, so I was inherently very anti-China right from the start. Though I'm very fond of Chinese food, and I always wanted to become a Buddhist monk right from when I was a very small child. I used to tell my dad that I want to become a monk, and I used to go to China. I want to go to China and all that. So, but I have been inherently very because of what they did to us in 1962. And if you look at the future, we are looking at something that's going to fructify into a kind of unstable world for next about 8 to 10 years. We are seeing a level of instability, and you can say that alignments happening. Quad is one of them, where the pro-China and anti-China forces are going to get more and more focused. They are going to get more and more aligned, and the very fact that China has declared that it will reunify the mainland, that part is one trigger that can go into a global conflict, that can cause a global conflict where Taiwan is invaded by China. And that will happen somewhere before 2049, because if 2049 is supposed to be the year when China, as he has said, that China will become a global power, which means it has to resolve the Taiwan issue at least 10 years before. So you're looking something like 2035 to 2038 when it has to have Taiwan captured. 2035 to 2038 is just about 10 years from now, 8 to 10 years from now. So, which means 8 to 10 years, Taiwan cannot be actually just invaded in a single go and captured. Taiwan is not exactly a single island also. It is multiple islands. So it may involve a struggle or a war kind of situation for good about 4 to 5 years. Now, when that kind of a situation is going to arise, that is the future that we're looking at. Then within next 4 or 5 years, you will start seeing the chaos hitting us. And when China starts doing anything of that kind against Taiwan, it will start unsettling the borders with the rest of the neighbors who are anti-China. If there is a friendly Russia, then probably Russia is not going to get invaded. If there is a friendly India and India succumbs to the Chinese hegemony, then probably India will not be invaded. But if any country stands in the path of China, like Vietnam, like India, or any other country which starts not paying the tributary state license fee to China, then China is going to do what it has done to Australia now in a much more drastic military fashion. So that is what is coming out of this, and that is what we are seeing in next 8 to 10 years. That is my personal take on this. So when you look at a strategic posturing, I think we are looking at a very unstable world. But is that the end? And there's nothing else happening in the world other than materialization? No, that's not correct to assume. Progress will keep on happening. The COVID will take around 1 or 2 years to go, and then the economies have to recover. There's a recession, a slight recession that may come up in next 1 or 2 years, and we'll recover from that. We are already seeing those signs of recession there, and in that we are seeing the power struggle also happening. So there is reposturing, and there is a lot of chaos that we'll see in next 10 years. And post that, the settlement will happen. It will either be that China will give up its those kind of things, and it will learn to live with the rest of the world, and or it will decimate itself, trying to find a military solution to this problem, because the rest of the world is not going to leave them.
Right, so that's a very interesting analysis on the next coming 8 to 10 years, and I can't help but notice the poster behind you, a very pivotal moment in the epic Mahabharat. And I also know that Dr. Jaishankar frequently alludes to the lessons Mahabharat has for India in its international foreign policy as such, and as for the world in general. So, what, according to you, is are the lessons that we can take from our very great epic for going forward?
Yeah, so you see in Mahabharat, during that when so there are two incidents which are my favorite. One is when Gandhari is lamenting on the death of her son Duryodhan, and that time Krishna comes there, and she actually curses him and says that you will also die a very painful death, and your entire clan will be destroyed. And Krishna takes it gracefully, and she asks him that you are a god, you could have prevented the war. Why did you let it happen? You could have taught them a lesson in some other way. I mean, this was devastating war. It was so painful for both sides. I have lost all my sons but one. So she uh, she asked this question, and Krishna told that yes, if I wanted, I could have stopped the war, and in one day, I could have picked up my weapon, and I could have taught everybody a lesson, and I would have finished off in one day. Okay. Now look at the dichotomy here. Here he is talking to Gandhari towards the end of the battle, and there, when he starts the battle, he's trying to convince Arjun that Arjun, you don't have any options. These people in front of you are already dead. If you don't kill them, somebody else will. And if you die, you will go to heaven. If you win, the entire earth is yours. Now look at that. And then at the end of that Gita Upadesh, he says, Yada Yada Hi Dharmas, that part, where whenever there is unrighteousness, I reincarnate myself. Now, that thing actually is a hint that war is a permanent state, that we have to be prepared for war always. And this cycle continues. Unrighteousness has to come, righteousness has to defeat it. And this cycle of righteousness and unrighteousness will continue. You cannot get out of. So when you are saying you are looking at this, and now this is there in our genetics. This is what we are. We were 5,000 years ago, and we were in fact 7,000. Or in fact, that is a Western way of timing it. But Dwarka remains, which are there below the ocean, they've been dated to thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. I'll not get into that. There is a separate topic, but I would like to state here that our civilization has had a long continuity. And when somebody like Krishna is telling that this righteousness and unrighteousness have to coexist, and the righteousness has to defeat unrighteousness in a cyclic order, which means we have to be prepared for the worst. So when people say that, when I got commissioned into the army in 1993, and when I used to discuss, like I told you, that anti-China feeling was genetically, embedded into me. So when I used to speak in the army circles about this anti-China thing, that why do we allow them this line of actual control to patrol inside our area of the line of actual control? At least they have taken 40,000 square kilometers. Why aren't they happy with that? So I used to be hushed into a silence. And now it's been almost 27 years. And if you look at now, the people are speaking out very openly. I would have never imagined the Indian Prime Minister going to Nimu and declaring that right from Razangla to DBO, every mountain stone and every dust particle has been indebted to you. So that kind of statement I could have never imagined Indian Prime Minister giving. So we are imposing ourselves, and something that was imagined would never happen, like we showing our eyes to China. I mean, at that point of time, 1990s, we used to say that we are a brother civilization, an Asian civilization that shares, almost common goals and all that, and we will actually be always friends. But that's not so. And with I'll just add one more little bit to it. Samuel Huntington, in his paper "The Clash of Civilizations," actually quotes that nation state will remain as a paramount center of power, and that truth is undeniable. This he wrote in 1991, and he created those 9 civilizations which will always be at war with each other. And these war may be cyclic. Few civilizations will align with each other for a certain period of time, but these 9 have their permanent identities. And that at that point of time there were a lot of critics. Till about next 2 or 3 years there were just criticisms coming out of that paper. 9/11 happened, and those so many things happened, and most of his prophecies which were there in that paper actually have proved very, very true. So I would say that our civilization as such, and whatever Krishna says in Gita and Mahabharat as an epic, actually teaches us a lot. There are a lot of in between the line lessons that have to be learned there. Every story has a lesson, and that lesson is strategic and global. And we have to draw those lessons into our living life, and those lessons can be applied anywhere, whether it is your corporate life, it's your day-to-day life, it's your whatever it is. Those lessons can be applied everywhere. So what I would say is that all of them are relevant, and let's take it as is and go ahead and refine it. And that's how the Hindu dharma has grown. I mean, we have refined ourselves and refined it. It's not a dharma, it's a way of life. And we have refined ourselves, and we have grown over a period of time, and we have become better and better with every, let's say, every incarnation.
That was very insightful, sir. Actually, what you say reminds me of this Latin maxim which says, if you want peace, you should be ready for war. And it just goes at the heart of what you're saying. And I think our time is almost up, but I have this one question since you mentioned that you've been interested in China for a very long time. So there was this phrase going around in the 1960, before the 1962 Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. So were we never friends, or is it something that changed over the period of time?
So I have tried to understand this problem with China. I will call it this problem with China over a long period of time, and I would say that see, how does a person become a friend? If you look at this entire belt from Afghanistan, Pakistan to India, we were basically a single civilization for a very long period of time. I mean, you look at the entire time Ashoka's time, right up to the British invasion and the taking over of the Indian subcontinent and dividing the boundaries and countries and all that. We were a single, a unified kind of a. I can say that everything, Sindhu Nadi and south of it, east and south of it, was India, and the Himalayas were a formidable barrier. Whether it was Winston who came and went about the continent and did some studies on India, whether it was the Tibetan Buddhism which went to Tibet and then thereafter a modified form went to China, we kept on contributing. India has been a spiritual contributor to the world. So we kept on contributing to the world civilization from the spiritual point of view. But that spiritualism, after China entered a communist era, that spiritualism actually died. Suppose we look at the China of 1949, before 1949, or before the collapse of the monarchy there, before 1933 or that time, that period. Uh, China was more of a kingdom that could have become friendly to us. There were certain elements of China in its monarchy form that would not have been so inimical to the idea of India. But the China that we are currently seeing is a communist country, and a communist country by its very structure, the command system that is its structure, is expansionist in nature. And why it is expansionist? Because it never manages its internal resources well, and it always wants to grab on more land, grab on more resources, grab on more manpower to keep its engines functioning. Now, the moment it stops its expansion and grabbing action, it will start collapsing on itself. There is a theory that goes on that if the Chinese economy stops growing at more than 4% per year, there'll be so much of unemployment inside China that there'll be a revolt and the Chinese Communist Party will be driven out. Now, if you're looking at that kind of a situation, then China is a permanent enemy of India as till the time it is a communist CCP there. And are we seeing the CCP going away in a near future? No, we are not seeing that. It has millions of members, and just like I told you that when an aircraft carrier has to be brought to a halt, it takes 20-25 kilometers to come to a halt when it's traveling at 40-45 knots. So it is something like that. The communism in China will not collapse overnight or within 2 or 3 years like it happened in Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, the communism thrived for about 76 years and then collapsed within 2 to 3 years. Okay, but those 2 to 3 years were very chaotic. But Soviet communism was different from the Chinese communism. Soviet communism was from the industries, the workers of the world unite. And the Chinese communism was for the peasants, like it was agricultural revolution. The peasants were the basic foundation of it. So these two communist theories were different and the foundations were different. And hence, the Chinese communism is going to have a larger, longer survival period. So when people say, and they studied, actually, Chinese studied the Russian collapse, the Soviet collapse in 1990s. And they come out with a model that this is how we will go ahead to survive more than 76 years or more than 100 years or whatever it is. So probably till 2049, I am not seeing the communism in China collapsing. Until then, China will be a enemy state as far as India is concerned. If the communism in China collapses before that, it will be a welcome thing. And we can absolutely go back on our strategic rethinking on how to get China into the folds of democracy and helping them out with whatever they want help.
Thank you, sir. And I think that brings us to the end of the session. But before we go, and like you mentioned, the rise of China and the whole strategy around it, I was wondering if you had closing comments on what could be, if not the Quad, then what could be the effective counter to Chinese growth?
So what I would like to say is that a Quad has gained relevance primarily because of the anti-China feeling that has come up after COVID. And this is not going to sustain it, because just having anti-China feeling is not what Quad actually should aim for. It should aim for a larger well-being, and that is also a understanding between the states as of now. But let's say, if we imagine a world where China stops its current aggressive moves, in that scenario, will the world have a Quad? I don't think you will have a very, very effective Quad. If China gives up all its imperialistic or expansionist designs, I don't think Quad will exist in its current form. So my thinking is that we as a nation should be prepared on our own, and whatever little bit of help we get from Quad is most welcome, and we should contribute wherever possible. And Quad should be something like emergency button, so that we keep on practicing our military drills, we keep on doing our trade talks, we keep on helping each other in economies and in case of disputes and other things. And when the emergency comes, then quickly we are quickly able to respond to it. And those emergencies can come up in various ways in which China is acting in the Pacific and Indian Ocean. And that is what I'm thinking is the future of for the next about 10 years.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for your closing comments. And this brings us to the end of this session. I would really like to thank you so much for taking out your time for a busy schedule and agreeing to this discussion. I look forward to more sessions in the future as well. And I would like to thank all our viewers for joining in today. We hope to see you next time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.